Hello and welcome to A Gamer Draws. My name's Sarah and in today's video I'm going to be talking to you about line weight. So basically line weight is the thickness or the heaviness of a line, and by affecting that you can create some really interesting little effects on your artwork. The most common things for this to be used for are comics and manga and sequential art and also animation, but you can use it for basically all art to exaggerate and change your artwork. I hope this helps. So let's get into the tutorial. So what you can see I've done here is I have drawn a quick sketch of Riku from Kingdom Hearts. The reason why I picked this image is because it's a great example of depth and perspective, and that's what we're going to focus on first. So what I'm doing is I'm going around the whole piece in just, I believe it's a 0.3 pen. Now I'm going around the background with a much thinner pen, and what that does is it makes the background a lot further away than the character, which is really helpful. It means that you're not going to feel as much stuff is clashing with each other. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at where his hand is, which is reaching out, and I'm going to go around that with a thicker pen than anything I've used previously in the image. Now the reason for doing that is that this thicker line draws your attention to it and makes it feel like it's a lot closer to the camera or yourself, whichever you like to imagine it as. And I'm exaggerating that on that left side for us, right side for him, that side of his body, so that that whole area is a lot more exaggerated, and the thick lines on the hand don't look as out of place, but they are still a lot thicker than the rest of the image. Next, what I've got here is a little sketch of Vulpix, and what I'm going to talk about here is exaggerating your lines to create movement. So again, I'm just going over with the same width on the whole piece, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about what areas of the image are exaggerating the movement the most, and because Vulpix is running essentially towards us, I'm going to take that whole half of his body and really exaggerate the lines there, particularly around his paw that's reaching out, and that way you're going to really draw attention to the fact that there's movement happening there. And that will slowly fade into the original lines that we created in the rest of the image. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to add a tiny little bit of shading with the lines, just in the areas around his tail and the areas that I think would have had some movement in them as well, especially curved areas like you can see it on his thigh. After that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create speed lines, but rather than the classic straight lines, I'm essentially pulling the lines that I created originally off of his body. So you can see it's not just straight lines, it's also, there's a little bit of a curve, there's a little bit of a scratchiness. It's just, it looks like part of the line is just being essentially smudged backwards. And the lines that are near the front are going to be thicker, and the speed lines on his tail are going to be a lot thinner, so that it still exaggerates that original effect that we were going for, where one area has a lot more movement on it and is a lot closer to us than the other, and that creates a really nice flow throughout the whole image. Next, I've got this little sketch that I've done of Link. This is Wolf Link from Twilight Princess. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the whole of the outer edge of Link. And this is with, I believe, a 0.5 pen. By the way, I know that when I'm showing the pens, they're upside down. I'll make sure I get that right for my later videos. It was just the way I was looking at the camera screen. Anyway, so I'm going around the whole of the outer edge of Link using this pen. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in for the details on his body, like his eyes and his patterns, with a 0.2, so a slightly smaller pen. And the reason why I'm doing that is, you'll see this get done in cartoons all the time, it's because it means that the outer edge, essentially the silhouette of the character, is a lot more obvious, and that makes you read a character a lot easier. Now, the reason why I've created this image is because I'm going to focus on grounding your characters, and this is something I learned about in graphics and animation. You really want to exaggerate the lines on the part of the character that is touching the ground. Now, the reason you want to do that is because as you looked at the image before, it kind of looked like he was floating in midair. When you add these thicker lines that are touching the ground, it really adds a sense of both weight and gravity to your character. It pushes that part of the character down and flattens it into the ground, creating this grounding effect. So now when you look at the image, when you're adding in that ground, you can really tell that the top of the character is this 3D object that's off of the ground, and these lower areas where I've really exaggerated the lines are touching the ground and therefore creating a proper sense of 3D. Next, I've got this little sketch that I've done of, not Lightning, Sarah Farron from Final Fantasy 13-2. Now, I'm starting off with a really thin pen. I believe I'm using a 0.1, and the reason why I'm doing that is because this one's going to be about light effects and how that affects your line. So if I use a really thin line to begin with, then that means when I go in with the thicker lines on the shadow areas, they're a lot more exaggerated and you can read that a lot quicker. So I've drawn in where the light's going to be. Because it's going to be sunshine, it's got 3 straight lines rather than a pinpoint light, which would be splaying outwards. So all the areas that are on the opposite side to that light source are going to have the thicker lines because they're the areas that are in shadow or cast shadow. So you can see here I'm going around the edges of her hair, the edges of her body with this thicker line, but I'm not touching all the parts that are hit with light. Something that I also want you to note is the fact that I've left the bridge of her nose without any lines. The reason why I've done that is because that's probably the one point on her face that is being hit the most by the sunlight. So I don't want to detract from the effect by putting lines there. You'll see this get done in manga a lot. Usually breaks in the face, breaks in the chin, breaks in the lips. Areas like that where there are these, rather than there being a line there would normally be a white line where the light is hitting. Now, to exaggerate this effect, you can go in and really thicken up and darken those lines. Now, the reason you might want to do this is, for example, if rather than normal daylight, which I began with, you might have a sunset, which is a really bright light in one area, and then areas behind it get these really strong cast shadows. So what I'm doing is I'm going back in at all the areas that would have hit the light and doing these nice curved, thick shadows, really exaggerating the lines there. And now the final technique that I want to talk to you guys about is about drawing your line or making a picture more readable, I guess, by exaggerating a certain object or feature. So I'm creating this really messy drawing of some ice cubes, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I want a complicated image. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in with this front ice cube, and that's the one that I want people to look at in my scene. So I've gone back in and drawn that with a thicker line, and then I'm going around the very edge of it with an even thicker line. And you'll see this done a lot in cartoons, particularly things like Tom and Jerry. If you see the character go to pick up an object, it's usually the one that has the thickest line. And the reason why they do that is because, one, it's easier for the animators to know what to do with it, and the rest of it's painted in the background. But also, it means that you know where to take your line and where the next action's going to take, and the viewer can follow the action easier. So I hope this has helped. I showed you a bunch of little techniques that you can do with your lines. If you did enjoy it, please give me a like and subscribe. I'll be having videos out every Wednesday. And if you tried out any of these techniques, please leave a comment in down below and show me your drawings with your little goes at these techniques. I'd love to see them. and let me know what kind of things you're struggling with at the moment. If there's any in particular art stuff that you're having issues with or you want advice on, and I'll see if I can do it in the next video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next week.